welcome back to Office Hours. I'm Steve Kellner, and with me here is Dr. Lance Rosa. We're both with the Rosa Law Group, and today we're going to be talking about signing bonuses. Very, very common thing we see in pretty much all veterinary associate employment contracts these days. Hey, Lance, you want to give us a little bit of the history of signing bonuses before we dive into the nuts and bolts?
Absolutely, Steve. Hey, good to see you. And yes, this is something that's definitely changed in both of our careers. Steve, you've been reviewing these contracts for veterinary contracts for over 20 years now. I've been close to 10 to 12 years at this point. And we never saw this 4, 5, 6 years ago. It was exceedingly rare, to see a signing bonus. But at this point in time, basically every single contract that we see, whether it's on the corporate side or on the private side, has some sort of signing bonus. And yes, we generally work with a lot of new graduates and new veterinarians, but also we work with experienced veterinarians that have been out for 5, 10, 15 years, and we work with a ton of specialists as well. And so all of these contracts essentially at this point have some sort of signing bonus provision in them. So extremely common. The data actually tells us that about two-thirds of new graduates receive some sort of signing bonus. And on average, that signing bonus is about $20,000. That's the data from the AVMA, the senior survey data. We don't have data from the class of 2025 yet, but we expect to have that out, relatively soon here. But that really doesn't even match our experience. I think that data really undershoots, the amount of people getting a signing bonus, but also it undershoots the value that we see on these signing bonuses. I think maybe that data was including some interns or some other people that really don't necessarily traditionally get any sort of signing bonus, academics, people going into their PhDs and things like that. When we're talking about private practice, and I mean that's both corporate and independently owned practices, I would say that number is well in the 95% range. What do you think, Steve, of what you see?
Easily. And I think what also might be messing that survey up a little bit is the question is a signing bonus. There's a lot of different types of bonuses. Sometimes they're called signing bonuses, sometimes they're not. So, someone who's filling out the survey, did I get a signing bonus? No, getting these other bonuses, but not a signing bonus.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. So actually the word signing bonus is kind of a misnomer, right? You don't, I think, that some people kind of imagine that they sign their contract or their agreement and then the people with the big check and the ticker tape and the balloons come out and, here's your signing bonus like you get in the Major League Baseball or or NBA. It's like, no, that's not exactly how it works. I mean, they call it a signing bonus, but at its very best, Steve, it's really a starting bonus. 90% of them that we see, actually aren't paid until the veterinarian starts the job. And that's a really important point because some of these students might sign this contract as an early third year or early fourth year and it says signing bonus on the paper, but they don't actually get that money until they start working there in the following May or June or whenever they graduate if they're on the trimester system. So it's really it's a starting bonus at best. But in my mind, in my legal mind, and your legal mind, Steve, we think of these as retention bonuses. And the reason for that is every single one of them has some sort of retention component, meaning that if the veterinarian doesn't work there for a certain number of months or years, then there's a clawback provision that they have to pay that quote unquote signing bonus back. And so if you really get down to the legal nuts and bolts of it, it's kind of thought of as a forward, hey, I'm going to get my money now, but it's actually not my money until I'm retained or I stay at the practice for a certain amount of time. And therein lies the problem, right? So there is no such thing as a free lunch. There is no such thing as money without strings attached. These quote unquote signing bonuses have significant strings attached. And Steve, I was kind of racking my brain as we were thinking about this, but I can think of in the last, probably 4 or 5 thousand veterinary contracts that we've seen, I can think of two of them where it was just free money.
Yeah.
Hey, here's, and I remember one of them was $10,000. Here's $10,000 just because I like you and I want you to sign this contract and there's no strings attached. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. It was a very relatively small amount, but it was truly a not a gift, but it was truly a bonus with no strings attached to the veterinarian. Every other one of them, 4,998, had some sort of strings attached. And that's really where we spend a lot of time in our negotiation process.
Well, I'm gonna add one more because coincidentally, I just was speaking with an associate who very interesting ex was offered all kinds of bonuses, but at the very end, right to get them to sign, they offered a 10,000 free and clear in
Wow.
addition to everything else, kind of just to get over the final hump. So, I wonder if that's something we might see because I mean, I am seeing some other corporates starting to maybe say, okay, we're going to give you all these ones that are repayable. Here's a little $5,000 just for you.
Just for you, right? So, it's still exceedingly rare.
Exceedingly.
It's exceedingly rare. So I think, for all, kind of all intents and purposes, the veterinarian should expect to have some sort of what we call a clawback, right? Some sort of clawback on that money that's coming to them. And that's where we really get into the details on these signing bonuses. I keep saying quote unquote, because I don't actually like the term, but that's what they're called in the contracts. That's where we really get into the details about what does that repayment look like? When is the repayment triggered? How long do we have to work there to get the repayment? And that's a very important concept. And I guess before we move on, Steve, we really kind of need to talk about, some other names that they kind of call these things as well. And so yeah, they call them signing bonuses a lot, but also we see a lot of retention bonuses. And I'm sorry, a lot of relocation bonuses. And this is really by the corporate employers. They like to call them relocation bonuses. And these can be significant, 15, $20,000. And they're traditionally meant to, to help pay for moving expenses, the U-Haul or the movers or, the deposit that somebody needs to put down on a house or an apartment, things along those lines. But here's the kicker, Steve, and we got to talk about taxes on a number of different things. But the tax bill of 2018 eliminated the non-taxability of these relocation slash moving bonuses, meaning that if the employer gives the employee 5,000, 10,000, $15,000 for their relocation, that is now a taxable event. And that's been 7 years ago, Steve. And so it's kind of like, did you guys not get the memo about the taxability from 7 years ago? Absolutely. These smart corporate accountants and corporate lawyers know that that's a taxable event. But for some reason, I think it means it's a little bit easier for the veterinarian to swallow if we call it a relocation of bonus. And they may not know those taxes are going to hit, later on, down the road. But when we see those higher relocation bonuses, 5, 10, $15,000, they almost always have that clawback, that retention on them as well. So it's like, well, wait a minute, you might as well have called it a signing bonus or a starting bonus or just, hey, here's some money for candy. It's all going to be the same taxable event, but we call it multiple different things.
Well, that's what I love to see. Like, I mean, it's instead of just saying, "Hey, here's one big bonus, call it whatever you were," we're gonna make it look better by breaking it up into three, maybe four
Different
different
types of names.
types
Yeah.
of bonuses that you might receive. And I mean, I had started calling them, prepaid retention bonuses. This is a
Hmm.
prepaid retention bonus. And then to my shock, I started actually seeing prepaid retention bonuses, which was we'll give you the signing bonus for year one. And then at the start of year two, we're going to give you another bonus. We're going to call it a retention bonus, but it's going to be tied to repayment. When in reality, a true retention bonus should be paid upon completion of the term. I work 12 months. I get the bonus. The bonus is for the 12 months. There's no repayment. Another thing we're seeing is, and we were talking about, you don't get this bonus when you sign. Well, recently we've seen a couple of companies start in with something that's called some variation of early bonus, where you
Hmm.
do get it upon execution. And we
Yeah.
see mainly being offered to students that are maybe a year out from graduation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's a problem with those, right?
Yeah, yeah. So a couple of things that really kind of pique my interest, and on these. And so, one of which is, they basically put that student now on payroll, more or less. And so, if we're talking about income-driven repayment, which obviously that's a whole nother conversation about where that thing is going to sit, down the road. But, historically, that kind of throws off some taxation and that zero tax filing that most students get as a third and fourth year, or at least a third year and half of their fourth year stuff. Now, some of those students can take that money and apply it to their tuition, which does help some. And that's actually an event that helps lower their student loan balances. But in my mind, it's really kind of preying on that student. It's borderline predatory. Yes, it's helping the student out, but that's such a hot topic for those students, that last year of tuition and accruing that large amount of student loan balance that goes along with that fourth year, that they just kind of grasp at these things and they sign that first offer that hits the table. And ultimately, what we see is down the road, that can be the problem, right? Is that the practice actually isn't a good fit. They didn't really understand what they were getting into. They didn't really have a good grasp on where they wanted to end up with their career. It's 18 and 24 months, before the actual thing is going to occur. And I think this is what you're getting at, Steve. But now let's fast forward that now veterinarian is 6, 8, 9 months into their career in this new job. They figure out that they don't like it. It was the wrong decision. They hate it, and now they're sitting there looking at a 50, 60, $70,000 repayment provision, and that money's already gone, right?
Yeah.
And so
I'm,
that's my big kind of hurt, right? That's where I really am empathetic to these folks, because they don't have 60 or 70 or $80,000 sitting in the bank that they need to quit their job. And we haven't really talked about this yet, Steve, but nearly half of our practice is really getting people out of these contracts, right? So, Steve tends to focus to getting people in the contract. Myself and Madison tend to focus on people getting out of the contracts. And so we take one of these emails literally on a daily basis where somebody says, I am getting sued for 40, 50, 60, $100,000. The biggest one that we've seen was $300,000 because I signed this signing bonus, which was actually a retention bonus. And now the practice is demanding that I pay it back. And so it's not, these practices don't just forget about this money. It doesn't just go away. I mean, they get really aggressive about getting this money paid back. And so we work really hard to negotiate that. But it hits a soft spot for me because I'm talking to those folks that are having to pay that money back.
yep. The one other thing with the early bonus, and before we dive into like all the bonuses you get after you sign, is if they're giving that to you the end of third year, beginning of fourth year, and you're not like 1,000% certain that like this is where you want to go, a year's a long time. You could decide to take a whole nother career path in a year. But if you took that money, you've got to pay all of it back if you don't start that job.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't tell how many, friends of mine, veterinary students, colleagues that have gotten into that fourth year and they developed a love for whatever, ophthalmology, dentistry, internal medicine, surgery, and they decide, hey, I want to go do this, or hey, I decided I do want to do mixed animal medicine, or I don't want to do mixed animal medicine. They change their career path, during that fourth year. And that's a problem, right? And these are, let's just be frank, Steve, these are designed to lock that veterinarian into that job.
Yep,
They're
100%.
designed to make them start and to make them finish that job, regardless of the wellness, the intentions, the health and well-being of that veterinarian, or that veterinary student. And so it's not free money, and it's not money. I love signing bonuses. Don't get me wrong. I want veterinarians to take signing bonuses, but I think you nailed it, Steve, when you said we've got to be 1,000% sure. We've got to go check, all the other jobs, go apply at other jobs, really do some soul searching on what we want our first job to be. Is this job going to give us the mentorship and and the skills that we need to be a good veterinarian throughout our career. Does this workplace have the people and the teams and the staff and the culture, that all fits and aligns with that veterinarian's goals? And if any of those things are not true, then hey, it's time to pump the brakes. And so, I cannot stress that enough. It's just such a big deal for a veterinarian's wellness and financial wellness as well.
Yeah, and pumping those brakes is a lot harder when you've already taken $20,000 from the company.
Yeah.
And now you've gotten that $20,000. You've got to pay that back if you don't start with one of these early bonuses. What about the taxes, Lance? Why is that a problem?
Yeah, and that therein lies the exact problem, Steve. And so, these bonuses are taxed at the highest applicable tax rate, which is in the high 30s, depending on what state you're in. Sometimes some states will actually pass over in the 40% range. And so, what's standing between that veterinarian and the practice, so the practice's money leaves the ACH system, goes to the payroll system, and before it gets to that veterinarian or student's account, the IRS steps in and takes out somewhere in the realm of 38 to 42%. And so the veterinarian never sees that money. I mean, it's paid in, it's withdrawn from their paycheck. And so let's just say hypothetically, that a veterinarian signs a $50,000 signing bonus, which is really pretty common. I mean, Steve and I see these, on a daily basis at this point. And so $50,000 signing bonus, well, what actually ends up in their account is like 28 to $30,000. All right, so they never actually saw the full $50,000. All right, so from there, let's just say hypothetically, Steve, for a second, that veterinarian is a super astute, financially sound veterinarian. And they take that money, that now 28 to $30,000, and they put it in a bank account, a savings account at 2, 3, 4%, something like that. And they say, okay, I got this money in case I need to quit my job, resign, I got this money on standby. Well, if they need to resign in 4, 6, 8 months, and they're supposed to pay $50,000 back, they only have 28. And so they still got to come up with $22,000 just to resign from their job. And that $22,000 might as well have been $2.2 million dollars. Like they don't have that extra money laying around. And therein lies the problem is even if you're super financially astute, the taxes cause you to run into a new problem. Now, that's assuming that the veterinarian is super financially astute, and
Yeah.
that's not the case, right? We all spend the money.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here, right? Like it's not that we got to come up with $22,000. We got to come up with $50,000,
Yeah.
so even if you're assuming that it doesn't work, but in reality, it doesn't work at all. And that is exactly what the practice wants. They want that veterinarian to decide, okay, well, I just got to suck it up and keep working because I don't have $50,000, to pay our way off. Now, I want to, kind of dive into this before we go too far along, Steve, is just because there are some ways around this, right? I don't want to scare people to a way to like, okay, I'll never take another signing bonus again.
No.
There's a couple of things that we can do through the negotiation process. And number one, I think that's really understand that all of this is completely negotiable, right? 100, I mean, everything about this conversation that we're having is negotiable. There is no such thing as a lock stock, ready to sign. Everybody signs it, signing bonus. Every single time these are negotiated extensively, and all the little details in there are as well.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, a lot of people, oh yeah, of course I can negotiate the amount. I can ask for more. I can, but it's really not just the amount. It's about protecting yourself from not being in that situation where even if you were the most financially astute person in the world, you're still having to fill in that gap of the money you lost in taxes. Because I mean, let's face it, it's not a good feeling. Like it was a good feeling to get the signing bonus, but it's not a good feeling if you have to repay more than you put in your bank account.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I love them. I love them as long as they're appropriately written as far as, what can be negotiated is negotiated. And as long as the associate understands what the risks involved are as far as repayment goes.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just go through and
Yeah.
talk about a list of like things that we would negotiate. So number one, you mentioned it, the amount, right? And so every single time we're going to ask for more. Like if they offer 30, then we're going to, okay, come back with 50. If they say
Mhm.
50, then we're going to come back with 70, right? And so, we always want more in that signing bonus for us to take, these risks. The second thing is the term, right? And so
Yeah.
what is the length of the repayment provision that we're talking
Mhm.
about here? So a common one that kind of pops in my mind, Steve, is 2 years. And so they say, hey, we'll give you $50,000 and you don't have to repay it if you stay longer than 2 years, right? And we say, okay, well, okay, 2 years. What about a year? What about 18 months? Let's get that repayment provision as short as possible. 1 to 2 years is really pretty common, Steve, but it's not out of the realm of normal for us to see 3, 4, and 5 year repayment schedules. 5 years is an incredibly long time to commit.
Yeah.
And so that one's kind of a no-go major. Anything over really 2 years is kind of a no-go major red flag for most veterinarians, that I work with. So we want to get that as short as we possibly can. When you get into those big signing bonuses, like 200 and $250,000 signing bonuses for general practitioners, those are almost always 5 years, right, Steve? I mean, those are pretty lengthy situations.
Yeah,
So
and
no,
I really want everything. I want to see 1 year. I mean, I'm if it's 50 or less, I'm arguing for 1 year.
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
asking for 1 year. I'm seeing if we can get to 1 year. Maybe if we can't get to 1 year and you're offering 50, give me 25 for year one, give me 25 for year two. If I'm a person that doesn't need all that money right now,
Yeah,
and I know that I am going to be, and some people, they don't want repayment hanging over their head. It's a big
yeah,
stress point of them. Oh, I've got this $50,000 hanging over my head. We always want to make sure that you're doing the best for yourself based on your finances and how you kind of think.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like we have to talk to and weigh with our clients kind of the emotional and psychological aspects as well. Me, from a purely financial mind, I'd much rather have my money now rather
Give me
than
money.
a year from
Right.
now, right? I can
Sure.
take that money, I can invest it, I can do other things with it. I'd rather it sit with me than the practice. But, if the veterinarian's in a place psychologically or emotionally where it's like, hey, I've got this cloud hanging over my head all the time of this repayment, that's not a good feeling to go through life with. And so, we've got to weigh both of those things, overall. So I don't disagree with you there, from an emotional standpoint, but from a financial
Oh, I
standpoint,
want the money. I
we
want
want,
the
yeah, the time
money.
value of money says we should take the money now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So number two was the length, and number three, we kind of get into the details here, Steve, down in the weeds. But this is where I think most veterinarians end up, missing some real opportunity here when they try to negotiate this themselves. And one of those is the word prorated. And so many times the practice will say, "Hey, if you don't work here for 2 years, regardless of the reason of your termination, we'll come back to that in just a second, you have to pay the entire $50,000 back." All right. And so that word entire, all right, that 6 letter word creates a really big problem for me. What we want to do is change that 6 letter word over to the word prorated, right? So if you don't work here for $50,000, or sorry, if you don't work here for 2 years, you have to pay the $50,000 back. We wanted to say you have to pay a prorated portion of the $50,000 back. So let's play this out. If the veterinarian works there for 12 months, then they only have to pay $25,000 back. If they work there for 18 months, they only have to pay $12,500 back, which they may have that sitting in their bank. They may be able to do that. And I know, Steve, you actually run through the math for all of your clients to say,
Yeah.
hey, what is the kind of the break even point? At what point should you have the money sitting in your bank account? Obviously, the taxes have been taken out. At what point? 6 months, 8 months, 24 months. At what point is kind of your break even? Okay, now everything else, if I'm stay there, that's great, but I've got the money to pay it off. I know you do that
I, I
calculation.
I take it down to a really granular level sometimes. So, like, for example, $50,000 bonus. of over 2 years, it's valued at $2,083 a month. We know that you're going to lose about 20 grand in taxes. So I want to find out how many months do I have to work? Like if I get there to this practice, I thought it was going to be great, but I hate it. And that associate calls me up, hey, Steve, I hate it here. I really want to leave. I want them to know, well, you could leave now at month 3, but you're going to owe more money back than you actually put into your bank account. But if we take again that $2,083 that is a monthly payment on the 50,000 for 2 years, we multiply it by 10, so 10 months, that gives us about $21,000.
Yeah.
So now we know that if we can hang in there, and I'm just saying it's not a good fit. I'm not saying that it's toxic or there's anything hostile going on. It's just not a good fit. My recommendation would be to stick it out for 10 months. So at least you don't have that bad feeling of losing money. Yes, you're going to need to repay 30,000, but you're not repaying 40,000 when you only cleared 30,000.
Yeah, exactly. So that just the what is the break even point in time, that you need to get to with those taxes. But the key word here is prorated. We've got to get prorated somewhere in there. Now, some practices do actually start with prorated, which is great. I think that's very fair, but a lot don't. It's up to the veterinarian to negotiate, hey, let's take entire out and put
Yeah.
in the word prorated so we can play this little game and see how every month we kind of tick a little bit off. In Steve's example, roughly $2,000 off the total amount that we have to pay off. And so that prorated, insanely important word from my perspective.
Yeah, and let's say you are that super financially astute associate, and you did put away all of everything you netted. You make it to that 10 months. Hey, month 11, cut yourself a check for 2 grand out of that account.
Yeah, because you're not going to have to pay it back
You
anymore.
know you're not going to have to pay it back.
Yeah.
And you can do that every month until you hit the end of the term if you want.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The money doesn't have to sit there not really earning, intensive amounts of interest, and things like that. So that's number three. Got to get that word prorated in there. And now four, Steve, I mean, here we kind of get into the legal details, but these are insanely important for me when I'm basically fighting for someone not to have to want to pay these re-signing bonuses back or these signing bonuses back. And that is the method of termination, right? And so I know veterinarians are like, oh my gosh, like this is way down in the legal weeds. But how the veterinarian is terminated from employment should be very important on whether or not they have to repay that provision back. Let me give you an example here. So most of the time, these will start with the practice will pay you $50,000. You have to pay the $50,000 back if you don't work there for 2 years, regardless of the reason of your termination. That's why I said those words later, right? And so that little phrase right there brings in if the veterinarian resigns voluntarily, which is, many times the case, but also it includes if the veterinarian is laid off or if they are terminated at will by the practice like for financial reasons. And we've seen a slew of practices that have been closed, just closed for, just for economic reasons. Hey, this practice isn't working out. This urgent care isn't working out. And you're being laid off. Oh, and by the way, you owe us $50,000. That's a bad day, right? You lost your job and you owe us $50,000. That's not very fair at all. And then it also brings in, hey, what happens if the veterinarian is terminated for cause, right? And so these are all the things that are kind of hidden in that phrase, regardless of the reason, right? And so we want to change that to say, okay, if you resign, we kind of get it, right? Like if you don't want to be there and you've resigned and you're moving on to greener pastures, okay, you kind of have to pay the signing bonus back. And if you screw up, right? If you commit fraud, embezzlement, sexual harassment, whatever the case is, steal something from the practice and you're terminated for cause, okay, we kind of get it. You got to pay the money back. But being laid off for nothing that you did, that reason for the repayment, that reason for the termination, we should get that out of there, right? And so what we want to exclude in the legal language is from that, unless you are terminated for your reasons voluntarily, resignation or termination by cause, that's when you have to repay that signing bonus back. But if you're laid off, terminated at will, you don't have to pay the signing bonus back. And most practices will accept this, but this is way down in the legal weeds. and even the people on the other side, the regional medical director, the practice manager, even the practice owner sometimes won't really fully grasp what's going on with that language. But it's insanely important when I'm working with someone. It's like, okay, what happened around your termination? Well, they closed the practice, or they told me, things weren't working out, and they're asking me for the $50,000. It's like, okay, now we got something we can hang a case in if we have the right language in there to start with.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll see it. I'll see it also say, if employment is terminated, you will repay. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, that's not detailed enough.
Yeah.
We want it to be limited to resignation or termination for cause.
And that's
Um,
something really, Steve. I mean, we really started thinking about that and talking about that internally just a couple of years ago,
yeah,
because about that time, that's when we really started seeing a lot of the layoffs, and we started seeing practices close, and we started seeing termination. It's like, whoa, that makes a lot of difference in whether or not we have to repay this.
that's when we started seeing companies really a lot stronger than they had previously come after
Oh
those
yeah.
for those
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. After we handled a bunch of those cases, then that
Um,
was that was really really drew our attention, to the method of terminology.
I see a bunch of. I mean, I've seen agreements where for companies where it was great. It said resignation and termination for cause, and then recently that for cause just disappeared,
Mhm.
gone. Every time we ask for it to be put back in, guess what? It gets put back in, but now we have to catch it. Now they're relying on you not catching it
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than being there from the jump.
All of these things that we've just talked about are super negotiable. Like the whole thing about prorated versus entire, that gets accepted every time.
Yep.
The whole termination language, like it gets accepted the vast majority of the time. It's a function of the veterinarian catching it,
Yep.
or working with a professional that's going to catch it, but catch it and just ask for it. And it drastically changes the outcome, if this thing gets triggered.
Yeah. Yep.
So those are
Very.
four things I think about negotiating. Steve, anything else you want to add in there you can think of?
Yeah, kind of one of the things that I just wanted to talk about was like the negotiation itself, because I know it's got to seem kind of weird. I'm coming and I'm negotiating for a bunch of things that might happen if I leave this job that I haven't started yet.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's kind of like I liken it to, you know, lead with appreciation. Hey, I really appreciate that you're offering a signing bonus. However, there are some things I kind of want to address in here.
yeah,
You know, one of the things, if you get to the situation about if you have a full repayment and you want to ask for prorated repayment, a thing to say is, hey, I plan on being here long term. I can't predict emergencies though. I plan on fulfilling this term, being here years beyond, but let's say at month 10 I have an emergency that's going to force my resignation. Well, I completed 10/12 of this agreement,
yeah.
you know and that way you're also kind of reassuring them of, hey, I'm not trying to get all this dialed down just so I can take the money and run.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Steve. The way that I see it, and you nailed it, is there's kind of two approaches here. Is we want to create a hypothetical that is kind of makes it kind of seem kind of silly. So, let's say that the veterinarian um, becomes disabled or broke their leg 10 months into and I actually had a specialist do this one time. She fell off her horse and broke her hip. And so she was literally bedridden, and she could not practice for, I think it was 3 or 4 months. And so she couldn't complete the term of the contract. Well, it seems kind of silly if you're going to force me to pay back my signing bonus because I became injured. Oh, well, if it's silly, then why do we have it in there? Let's work around that, right? Another example is, let's say a family member gets really sick. Let's say that your, mom, dad, sibling, is diagnosed with, unfortunately, let's say cancer. I mean, life happens in our world, Steve, right? And so they're diagnosed with cancer, and you got to move back home to help the process and help take care of them. And you're going to have to resign because of that. Well, that would be a really unfair lawsuit, right? To sue somebody for $50,000 when their parent became very ill and they had to to move. So if that's the case, then we should carve those things out. And so when I explain that to clients, to veterinarians, they're like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, that would cause some huge problems. It's completely out of my control, but I got to do it, and I don't want to have to be stuck at this practice over $50,000 while my parents are, 4 states away, dealing with this illness." Okay, then we need to carve those things out. And so that's one thing, is to kind of create these hypotheticals and show the other side how an unfair and really honestly silly outcome, would come from that. And then secondly, what I really lean on a lot, Steve, is the market, right? And so I'll say, look, every other practice does it like this. It's really common that we have this prorated term in here. It's 70, 60, 70% of the time. To get in line with the market practice, you're going to have to make this change. It has nothing to do with the client, that we're working with here, the veterinarian. They're completely cool with it. They're going to be there for a long time. You guys are out of line, with the market. And I find that those two approaches, are really kind of a way to take the heat off the veterinarian, to say, I'm kind of thinking about leaving this job. I'm not 100% sure if it's going to work out. Well, we don't want them to have to come out and say that out loud, right? We want to take the heat off of them just a little bit.
Yeah, and kind of my takeaway from the whole thing is these bonuses are a good thing for veterinarians.
Yeah.
We did not see these when I started this. They were uncommon. It was the opposite. 5% had them, 95% didn't. They're great for veterinarians. It's great that it's a thing in the industry under whatever name you call them, signing, retention, relocation, early. You just have to make sure that these other components, that the amount is right, yes, but that these other components aren't gonna tie your hands and make you unable to leave a position that you'd like to leave.
Yeah, Steve, I really want to second what you said. I want to make sure we drive this point home, that I'm a big fan of signing bonuses as well. It's a great way to get money out of the practice into the veterinarian's hands. They're widely accepted. And also too, I want to really point out that they are highly negotiated, because it's not hitting the practice's long-term profitability for a long, long time, right? It's like, hey, we're gonna spend this money, get this person hired. They're going to get up to productive levels, and they're ultimately going to meet those higher compensation levels. But this is a way to kind of incentivize them for the long term without giving them a salary that's, unreasonable for long periods of time, without promising that long term, situation. So again, I am very much pro signing bonus, retention bonus, whatever you want to call it. It's just we have to do it on our terms, and we have to be aware of the downstream future self implications that these things can cause. If those things are knocked off, if we've got them negotiated where they need to be, then absolutely, we're going to encourage our clients to take these signing bonuses every single time.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I think that about does it for signing bonuses. Always good talking to everybody about this stuff and getting everybody on the same page. Lance, I guess I'll see you next time.
Yeah, Steve, yep. We'll go back to work and keep negotiating contracts here.
Always.